Here's a question for you. How does one man, working in a small garage in England, consistently build motorcycles that turn the heads of entire engineering departments in billion-dollar companies? No corporate board, no automated factory, no army of designers, just a man, some tools, and an approach that big manufacturers wouldn't dare try. And yet, his bikes aren't just functional, they're legendary. We're talking V12 Kawasaki's, wild two-stroke creations and hybrids that sound like the fever dreams of a mad scientist. Except, they actually run, they're street legal, and they sometimes outperform bikes built by corporations with entire skyscrapers full of engineers. So why does Allen Millyard refuse to follow their rulebook? What does he know, or what does he dare, that mainstream manufacturers avoid at all costs? Before we tear open this fascinating story, smash that subscribe button like you're loosening an over-tightened sprocket nut that's been mocking you for hours. Give it that one big push. Because today we're going deep into the world of a man who bends metal, rules and expectations. Allen Millyard isn't a product of a giant company's talent acquisition. He's a self-taught engineer with the kind of mind that sees engines not as they are, but as they could be. While most of us see a Kawasaki six-cylinder and think, that's a big engine, Allen thinks, what if it had 12 cylinders? His workshop, humble, his tools, mostly standard lathes, mills and machines any serious mechanic might own. There's no robotic welding arm, no million-dollar CNC cell. The magic is in his method, not his machines. Here's the shocking truth. Big manufacturers create machines designed for global production. That means tight budgets, massive supply chains and thousands of bikes that must be nearly identical to meet regulations in dozens of countries. Every idea is filtered through layers of cost-cutting, marketing adjustments and committee approvals. Allen skips all of that. His committee is a cup of tea and a notepad. If something needs to be cut, welded or redesigned from scratch, he just does it. No waiting for approvals, no supply chain delay. And this is where it gets wild. His one-man operation often achieves a level of craftsmanship that production lines with hundreds of employees struggle to match. But this isn't just about the physical workshop. There's a deeper philosophy here, one that explains why his bikes feel alive, while many modern machines feel, well, mass-produced. And that philosophy starts with a mindset mainstream manufacturers can't afford to have because it would break their entire system. Corporate manufacturing lives and dies by time. Every second a bike spends on an assembly line costs money. Faster assembly means lower costs. Lower costs mean happier shareholders. It's a system fine-tuned for speed, not for soul. Now imagine the opposite. Instead of rushing a bike through production in a few hours, you spend months on a single engine, fine-tuning clearances, balancing crankshafts by hand, shaping welds so neat they look like jewelry. That's Allen's world. He might spend 3 weeks machining a single component, not because he's slow, but because each step is an experiment, a refinement, a decision made by feel, not by a production quota. Here's an example. His Viper Phi 10 motorcycle powered by a Dodge Viper engine wasn't something you just bolt together and hope it works. It required a custom crankcase, redesigned cooling, unique chain drive, and an entire frame reimagined to handle the monstrous torque. A manufacturer would have shelved that project after the first meeting. Too expensive, too risky, not enough market demand. Allen? He just built it. And it worked. Mainstream brands can't take those chances. They have marketing calendars, dealer networks, and warranties to honor. Their customers want something reliable, affordable, and safe. Allen builds what excites him. And that's why his machines often feel like they've been engineered with passion first, profit second. But this leads to a fascinating tension. How can one man working at this slow, deliberate pace make bikes that sometimes outperform mass-produced machines designed by massive teams? The answer lies in what drives him. Because his reason for building bikes has nothing to do with what you think mainstream companies care about. Motorcycle companies have one mission: sell motorcycles. Sounds simple, but the reality is complex. They must please shareholders, meet emission regulations, hit price points, and plan next year's upgrade before this year's bike even launches. That means compromises, cheaper materials in non-critical areas, engines tuned for emissions rather than excitement, designs made to be safe for the average rider rather than thrilling for the passionate few. Allen Millyard? He doesn't care if a project sells one unit or none. He builds because he's fascinated by the challenge. Can a Honda twin become a screaming four? Can two Kawasaki Z1300 engines be married into one smooth V12? These aren't product plans, they're puzzles. And when profit isn't your goal, you make different choices. You over-engineer because it's fun. You use materials not because they're cheapest, but because they're right. You spend 200 hours on a crankcase because the idea of good enough feels like an insult. This is why Allen's bikes sometimes feel like they came from a parallel universe. One where motorcycles are built for the love of engineering, not the balance sheet. But there's a hidden cost to this. Because when you step outside the system, you carry a risk that big manufacturers spend millions to avoid. Every big motorcycle company has an army of lawyers whose job is to prevent disasters. They overbuild frames, restrict performance, add safety margins so wide you could ride a tank through them, because one lawsuit can wipe out an entire year's profit. Allen doesn't have that cushion. When he welds two engines together, he is personally responsible for making sure it won't shake itself to bits or twist the frame like a pretzel. There's no warranty department to bail him out. This risk forces him to think differently. Every weld is his signature. Every bolt torque, a handshake between his brain and the machine. It's terrifying, but also freeing. Mainstream brands have to design for the lowest common denominator, someone who might never change their oil, who might dump the clutch at red line on a cold engine, who might sue when they inevitably crash. Allen designs for excellence, for someone who respects the machine, who understands what it is. And ironically, that personal risk often leads to higher safety margins, not because lawyers demanded them, but because the engineer cared enough to make it bulletproof. But this creates another unusual effect in the industry. Because when a one-man shop builds better than $1 billion company, it sends shockwaves through the entire market. Mainstream manufacturers know Allen Millyard. They invite him to shows. They feature his bikes on TV. They shake his hand and give him awards. On the surface, it's all smiles. But behind the curtains, his work is a bit of a headache. Why? Because it sets expectations sky high. Riders see his hand-built V12 and suddenly wonder why the latest flagship superbike only added 2 horsepower and a new paint job. It's like an independent filmmaker creating a blockbuster on a shoestring budget. The big studios clap politely, but they also worry, what does this say about our system? Allen isn't trying to embarrass them. He's just doing what he loves. But love, in this case, exposes the truth. Passion projects can sometimes outperform corporate products. And that's why his name carries weight, not just among fans, but among engineers. Many secretly admire him because he does what they wish they could, build without compromise. But here's the final twist. If he worked like they do, we wouldn't even know his name. Because the very reason he refuses their methods is also the reason his bikes remain rare, almost mythical. Could a company adopt Allen's approach, handcraft every bike, take months per build, ignore profit margins? Not without collapsing. His method thrives precisely because it's personal, unscaled, and free of corporate gravity. Mass production exists because people want affordable, available motorcycles. Allen's bikes, if mass-produced, would cost as much as a house. They take years to deliver. And the soul, the experimental, obsessive one-man vision, would be lost in the translation. So he stays small, and that's what keeps it special. Like a rare instrument, each bike carries his fingerprints, literally. And this is where the paradox lies. The very thing that makes Allen's work so astonishing is also the thing that ensures it will never flood the roads. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to inspire, to remind us that even in a world of mass production and cost-cutting, there are still craftsmen willing to chase perfection for its own sake. So why does Allen Millyard refuse to work like mainstream manufacturers? Because he's not building for them. He's building for the idea that machines can still have soul. Mainstream companies have to answer to accountants. Allen answers to curiosity. Mainstream companies design to sell. Allen designs to see what's possible. If he played by their rules, we wouldn't have a Kawasaki 512 that sounds like a thunderstorm or a 5-litre Viper motorcycle that actually rides better than some sport bikes. We'd have more of the same, and the world has enough of that. His work is a reminder. You don't need a billion-dollar factory to create something unforgettable. You need vision, patience, and a bit of madness. And maybe that's why we admire him so much, because he's proof that one person with enough obsession can quietly outshine an entire industry. Now here's my question to you. If you had Allen Millyard's skills, would you work like the big brands, or would you risk it all to build something the world has never seen? Drop your thoughts below, and as always, ride safe, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next one. Drop your thoughts below, and as always, ride safe, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next one. Drop your thoughts below, and as always, ride safe, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next one.